Hey everybody, and welcome to the Master Level Marriage Podcast, where we discuss all things marriage and where you can discover the tools that you need to have a strong and healthy relationship. Our host, author, and marriage coach, Dr. Ronnie Gaines, will unpack many facets of a marital relationship as he dives into the dynamics of a marriage. In each episode, you will learn what it takes to succeed in your relationship and win in your marriage. Whether you are in the planning stages or have been married for several years, our desire is to help you grow and enrich your life as a couple and become a success story. Subscribe or follow us and be notified of each episode. Please leave us a review and help us help other couples. For more information, visit www.masterlevelmarriage.com. Thanks for checking us out. Now here's your host, Dr. Ronnie Gaines.
Welcome to the first episode of the Master Level Marriage Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Ronnie Gaines, and I am so glad that you are here listening to this podcast today. I don't know whether you're listening while you're at the gym, in your car, while you're taking a jog, or walking. Whatever it may be, whatever you're doing today, thank you. I'm so grateful that you're here with us on this podcast. You know, this being the first show, I want to introduce myself and let you know who I am, and also to give you some insights on what to look forward to in this podcast. Again, I'm so excited to launch this podcast because one of the things that is a passion of mine is marriages. You know, I've been doing marriage counseling for many years. I've done a lot of marriage coaching, counseling, whatever you want to call that. I've been doing a lot of that over the years. I have a master's in marital and family therapy. I have a doctorate in pastoral care and counseling. I am a pastor as well. And I have the opportunity to see many, many couples. And it has become a passion of mine. And you know, I've been married to my wife. Her name is Melissa, but I call her Miss. And if you hear me say that, if you hear me call her Miss, you'll know who I'm talking about. We've been married for well over 35 years. We dated for 6. So we were very young when we started dating, and we've been together for many, many years. And, you know, I've had many people say that they look at us and they say, well, you have the perfect marriage. Well, there are no perfect marriages, and we have had difficulties in certain areas, and we've worked on it throughout the years. It's not come easy for us, but we have worked and been intentional about making the marriage work. And now that I've had the opportunity to meet with many couples over the years, hear their stories, be able to work with them in different techniques and different approaches and things like that, has been really fulfilling to me to see couples begin to change their marriages and have a healthy marriage. You know, one of the things that I really love about marriage coaching is that when couples come to me, they come most of the time in crisis, and I have the opportunity to sit down with them and see their life change. Many couples have walked out and the marriage failed. Sometimes I seem to take that personal, that maybe I didn't do enough, maybe that I did not do the right things for that couple to help them maintain their marriage long enough to find some kind of health and then ultimately stay together and work things out. But I found that many couples come to me, and at least one of those individuals has given up. He or she has checked out. And I found that once one person has checked out, there's not a lot that anyone can do, not even the other spouse. It's sad, but it's true. But this podcast is about helping create moments in your married life where you can win at many, many things, many areas where you have complications or disagreements or discrepancies. This podcast is to help you. This show, I hope, will help you get the health that you need for your relationship, and you can win. I believe that every couple can win in their marriage if they're intentional about the different levels that you want to go to in your marriage, and also the approaches, the different things. And I take a little bit of different approach than some therapists and counselors. I have worked in a counseling firm for several years and learned a lot from those that were teaching me and helping me learn how to handle all kinds of situations, including some mental health issues. But I found my lane. I found the thing that I have the most passion for, and that is married couples. I love to do seminars. I love to go out and speak at conferences. I have a set of guidelines that I set up for myself when I go to these conferences and seminars, a process that I take all the couples through, that I believe if they follow that process, and it's intentional, each step is intentional, that they find health in their marriage. Not that everything's perfect, and not that there's no conflict. Conflict is inevitable. There's always going to be conflict. But I think and I believe that we can get better at our conflict. I believe that we can get better at working through things if we're intentional. I've had the great opportunity to travel international into Africa and speak to the African people, do conferences there. And I found out something. You know, the only countries that I've been in so far is Africa. But I found, and I've got some opportunities coming up where I can go into some other countries. And I have found this. Marriage is marriage. I know the cultures are a little bit different. Ideas and philosophies are a little bit different. But for the most part, being married to your spouse is the same wherever you go. They have the same questions. They have the same problems. They have the same issues. And it's been great going over into the African countries and holding these conferences and being able to hear stories of life change after I came back to the States. I'm still getting messages. I'm still getting text and messages from those in those areas saying people's lives are changing. Culture is changing. And so it's exciting to know that I have that opportunity to do that. And I believe that by going to other countries, it's given me the opportunity to see that we're all humans. We're all into this relationship called marriage, and it can be one of the most difficult things that we've ever been challenged with, but it can also be the most fulfilling. And I wonder sometimes why that marriage had to be so difficult when it can be so fulfilling. But I've come to know that a lot of it is that it's just differences. And the differences are what pulled us together, brought us together from the beginning, but at the onset. But throughout the marriage, the differences are what causes the most confusion, the most complications, the most distractions. So this podcast is all about marriage. And I want these shows to not be something that seems staged, if you will. I want it to be conversational. The reason I created this and designed it was to be conversational. I want to hear from you. Each week, every podcast will be intentional. There will be a topic, it'll be intentional, but I want it to be a conversation. So to help me with that, I need to hear from you. Whatever platform that you're using to listen to this podcast, there are places where you can click on to leave a comment or leave a question. And I encourage you to do that. Even in this first episode, is to click on the comments. Tell me where you're from. Tell me who you are. Give me whatever information you feel comfortable leaving. Let me know questions that you might want future shows to talk about. And I believe that together you and I will form a relationship, and I believe that there will be many, many testimonies, if you will, of people that their lives are changing, their marriage is changing through this podcast. That's my desire. I want to help as many people as possible. And many things that you'll hear on this podcast is a lot of valuable insights. Now, you can go and Google and pull up many things to do with marriage. There are marriage seminars. There's conferences all over. And this is one thing I learned in Africa and some of the other countries. Here in America, there's on every corner there's a conference, there's a seminar. In some of these other countries, they don't have that luxury. But sometimes the luxury is not our problem. The luxury is within ourselves applying the knowledge that we learn. We've heard this saying that knowledge is power. Well, knowledge is not power. Knowledge is potential power. So I'm hoping through this podcast and through these shows, through each episode, you'll gain the knowledge, but not just gain the knowledge. The power comes into the action, putting the knowledge to work. And that's what I want to see happen through these valuable insights that I want to bring on some guests on the show, that some of the experts in the marriage field. I've got some friends that I believe that we'll be hearing from that are experts in marriage. They see married couples on a daily basis, and I believe that they can help us and they'll help you in that. So we'll be bringing on some guests. We'll also be talking about these different practical tips. Now, again, my method is a little bit different than your traditional or your traditional therapist or counselors, but it's an approach that I have found to be very effective for me and effective for my clients. And I've had many wins and many texts from people saying, I just didn't see how these methods and these things were going to work. But through the process, we found healing, and we found that we can win through this process. So I want to talk for just a moment. You may be out there and maybe you're on the verge of divorce. Sometimes we don't want to hear the big D word, but you might be at that place where divorce is close. You just don't, you're about to give up. And maybe you're not. Maybe you're one of those that's just dealing with typical problems in a marriage. And I'm going to be talking to you about this in a future episode about what happens when we have a successful marriage and how that can lead to a failure. But divorce is not something that we want to hear, but you may be out there today and you may be even, it's come to your mind. And this is something I hope maybe this show can help you and keep that from happening. But there were some stats that I found through some different law firms, which has a lot of stats on divorce. And one source stated that an estimated 41% of first marriages in divorce. It could be 40 to 50%, depending on the source that you look at. That's first marriages. Overall marriages, there's close to 45% failure. But there's a 40 to 50%, maybe 40, it depends on the source again, a 40 to 50% of first marriages end in divorce. In second marriages, it climbs and it basically skyrockets to almost 60 to 63% of second marriages fail in divorce. Third marriages have over a 70% failure rate. That's huge. The more times that a couple gets married or a person gets married, the higher the risk of divorce. There's many factors that come with that. We'll talk about some of those probably on into some other shows. But it's devastating to think that the more you get married, the higher risk of failure. So your best shot is your first marriage. And you may be in your second or you may be in your third marriage now. And I like to say it like this: whatever level you're in, if it's a first, second, or third marriage, make that the final marriage. Do whatever you can. Do the intentional things that will help you in your marriage. Well, and there's some interesting things that I found. There was one called a gray divorce. I don't know if you have heard of this terminology or not, but it's called gray divorce. This is divorces that happen later on in the years of a person. And this particular law firm states that a gray divorce refers to the uncoupling of adults over the age of 50. Since 1990, the national divorce rate has doubled. It is even higher for gray divorce parties over 65. After being married for years, divorce is still something that happens in our culture and in the United States. The CDC data suggests that the total number of marriages in the U.S. is approximately 2,132,000. On average, the divorce rate in 2022 is lower than it was a decade ago. Now we wonder, okay, so if we're concerned about the divorce rate, but it's lowering, what's happening? Well, here's some reasons why the divorce rate seems to be lowering, which is we want to think, hey, maybe we're doing some good. And I think for some we are. I think there's some marriages that are healing. There's some marriages that are getting better. But for the most part, here's some of the reasons why you see the divorce rate in some of these law firms coming down. One of them is more couples are cohabitating. They're not getting married. They're just living together. So there's no marriage license. There's no divorce. There's no commitment. So whenever things go the wrong way, if they go south, they just walk away. There's no divorce, and there's no stats in that. Another thing is that millennials are waiting longer. So they're waiting longer to get married. And sometimes in our early stages of marriage can be some of the roughest times in our relationship, in our marriage, is going through those first few years of getting to know each other and getting to know our differences and getting to know each other in a way that where we can live together and we can work through the different difficulties and the problems. Another one was the higher education levels for women, which correlates with longer lasting marriages. And another one is that not all separated couples file for legal divorce. They just walk away and they don't file and they don't divorce. So they're just separated. And one thing that that's happened over the last 2 or 3 years is that the coronavirus pandemic has delayed a lot of marriages across the nation. So we see the decline of the divorces, but for the most part, we're still staying, the divorce rate still staying pretty high, even though some are not filing. The divorce rate is still staying high. I want to try to, as much as I can, cut that down. And through this process of these podcasts and these episodes, again, I want to work with you. I want to hear from you. And I want to know that we are gaining ground. I don't want to just put out content to be putting out content. I want to hear stories. I want to hear from you. I want to know that there is change. And there's, a person told me the other day, and they came to me and they said, I'm just having problems in my marriage. And I said, what does that look like? Tell me your story. And they said, we have problems communicating. And I just smiled. And I know that I didn't want to seem like I didn't care. But I looked at the person and I said, your marriage is no different than anyone else. This is one of the major problems in our marriages is communication. In fact, one source states that the problems and some of the most common reasons for divorce is communication issues being the top number one. Now, some sources will tell you that the number one reason is financial, money, but this particular source states, and I believe this source, that the most common reason, number one, is communication issues. We have trouble communicating. The second one was infidelity, and the third was financial problems. So we see that these are common in every relationship, not just common here in the United States, but common in marriage. So communication is key. we'll be discussing some of that and talking about some ways to communicate where you hear and understand each other. I've been married for over 35 years. I'm still trying to figure out my wife. I know she's trying to figure me out. I just don't know that we ever will completely figure out why we think the way we do. But communicating clearly is not trying to figure each person out completely, but it's just being able to hear and understand them and being able to communicate well. And, we live in an information highway. We have information at our fingertips, and yet we can't communicate as a couple. And so we need to be intentional about that. And so that is some of the things that we'll talk about in these episodes. I've learned this, that there's a key to everything. There is a key to success in anything. Now, this is not just marriage. This is anything. But the key to everything really is growth or progress. I believe that when a person is progressing or they are growing, things get better. I've always heard it said like this, and I believe that if you're not growing, you're dying. There's no such thing as a plateau. You're either growing or you're dying or you're declining. And I want to believe that growth is the key to everything. If we're progressing and if we're growing towards health. Tony Robbins says this. He said there are 6 core human needs. And he states it this way. He says, these core needs drive every decision you make. These 6 core needs drive every decision you make. And one of the core human needs is growth. If you're not growing, you're dying. And I hope that through this process and through these podcasts that we will learn to grow. And not just grow as a couple. I believe that growing personally is a key component to growing as a couple. Now, when you start talking about personal growth, it seems a little selfish, but we grow with each other once we have grown personally. There's a TV show that I love to watch called The King of Queens. And I know many of you have probably seen that show, but there's a particular episode where Doug and Carrie are on a plane and they're getting ready to land, but the pressure drops quickly when they're getting ready to land and the mask falls for everyone to grab a hold of and put, except for Carrie's. Doug's mask falls and he grabs it and he pushes it on and he sucks for air. Well, there was no problem. They landed. They were landing at the time that the mask dropped. And it became a huge thing in the episode that he was so selfish, pulling on his own mask and not helping his wife. They'll tell you on the planes that the reason that you put your mask on first is because you can't help someone unless you are healthy. He did the right thing, but it was funny because he sucked all the air down while his bride was sitting there with no oxygen. It's a funny show, but in reality, if you're unhealthy personally, it's very difficult to help your spouse, to help them with their needs. I don't want this growth thing, when we talk about growth individually, the personal growth, to be something that we view as all of our needs getting met and we don't worry about the others' needs. It's important that you meet the needs of your spouse. Each one of us have needs, but it's important that you grow personally to be able to help your spouse or to help the relationship grow. I've seen many couples that come to me and one of them is having so many difficulties personally that it's difficult for them to meet every need of their spouse, and it's causing problems. So growth is all about making space for the both of you where your relationship grows, but it's also to pursue individual goals, your dreams, and to become healthy personally. Through these episodes, many things marriage will be brought to the surface, but there will be many things personally that we will help heal, that will help grow, and I hope that will help you win personally, which will also help you win in your relationship. This podcast is designed for you, with you in mind, to help you grow. Now, again, I don't want it to be all about trying to get everything perfect. I'm human. I'm just like you. I make mistakes. I may make some mistakes in what I say. We'll go on, may stumble a little bit with some wording, but I don't want it to be such edited to the point where it's not a conversation. I want to be able to I want to speak freely. I want to be open and speak to you through this podcast. And I know the first episode has been somewhat just an introduction, but I want it to be an introduction to you to let you know that in the next few weeks, be ready to hear some great concepts, some great ideas, some things that you've probably never heard. But there'll be some things that may just be that helps reiterate what you already know. But I want us to grow together. But for us to do that, I need to hear from you. I've given you several avenues. You can scroll down on the information of whatever platform you're on, and you can see that there's a place where you could click to leave comments. Click on that. There's a form. Basically, it's a simple form where you can leave comments. You can leave questions about maybe future episodes that you would love to hear, to talk about. Tell me who you are. Again, give me whatever information that you feel comfortable giving me. Let's communicate. We'll be creating a Facebook page for this podcast where you can go and we can talk and we can collaborate there and learn from each other, learn from each other's mistakes. You know, I've learned this one thing. I've heard this, and maybe you have too, that experience is your best teacher. Well, I want to disagree with that. Experience is a teacher, but experience is not the best teacher. Yep. If I can learn something from someone else and not experience it, then my best learned experience or my best learned moment comes from someone else's mistake where I don't have to make it. And I'm hoping through some of my mistakes and some of our mistakes in whatever the audience has, whatever you maybe you want to share something, we'll learn from each other. I want you to, if you're watching this on YouTube, to subscribe, and so you can see every episode and not miss anything. Also, if you would, click on the link below and write a review. We would love to hear from you and hear what you think about the show. Write a review for each show, and also rate the show. This helps us and puts us in a different place in the platform to reach more people. So help us reach more people by writing in that review or rating the show. And each week we want to leave you with this. We want you to be your best self, live out your full potential, and experience your best marriage. I'll see you on the next show.